Welcome to the Welcome to the Art of Conscious Living. Today I have my guest, Katie Darling. She has an institute called iWave Institute, incredible work that she does here in the Bay Area of San Francisco and worldwide. Katie, thank you for taking the time out to speak with me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
How are you today?
I'm fantastic. I'm good.
Wonderful. So your work is incredible work based on a lot of research, a lot of experience that you've been doing for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
Please share with me where you started and when you started with your work.
Well, very quickly, I'll give you a very quick Reader's Digest sort of biography.
Mm-hmm.
I am the daughter of two physicist British atheists who worked on the bomb in the Second World War, and then Hiroshima happened, and they became aghast at the fact that they'd been part of this, and so they started the anti-nuclear movement in my living room when I was growing up. So I was brought up in this chaos and fear of annihilation, and it was very scary. And when I was 18, I became a monk. I had an Eastern guru like many people back in the 70s, and for 12 years I did nothing but meditation and full-time service and living a monastic lifestyle and traveling around the world teaching a kind of meditation that my guru put forth, my former guru I should say. And when I came to the end of those 12 years, which many people wish they could have, if only I could have, you know, a year sitting with a straight back on a round pillow, focusing, meditating. But after 12 years, I wasn't in some great shape. I was crazy. I was emotionally crazy and I was physically sick. And I discovered, after a bit of research, that what I had been doing was going up, 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 out of my body, meditating, witnessing myself as though I was some object, and that what I needed to do was to come down. So I started exploring all the kinds of methodologies of coming back into the body, coming back and inhabiting the emotional self as though it were not a dangerous animal, but actually a wonderful aspect of myself.
So henceforth, your institute, iWave Institute, what year did you form the institute?
Well, that was only stage 2, so then I came down and I did years and years of all the emotional therapy that everyone knows about, and physical movement therapies and all these different things. And then I went too far down and I kind of got stuck in a loop of emotionally processing myself and identifying with myself as being this lost, stuck inner child. And so then I had these two parts of my life, the spiritual, and which was more like clarity and light, and this lovely fertile darkness. And then in 1994, I had this breakthrough in which everything kind of became one. And that was the beginning of the work I'm doing now. And at that point, this breakthrough was that I felt as though I was melting into waves, and that the whole universe wasn't actually dry, it was wet. And God, as I had experienced before as a sort of light and a witnessing presence, became this real palpable feeling that I could feel, and I was floating in it. It was completely meeting my emotional needs and my physical needs. It was extraordinary. And during that waking up experience, which lasted about 3 days, it happened in Mill Valley, right near here, I was told by this oceanic field that I am called the Mother Wave. I didn't hear lots of words, but I heard those words, and so I started Mother Wave Institute. And that was in 1994. So over the last 17 years, it's evolved. It became eventually Soul Wave, and now it's in its third wave called iWave, or Infinite Wave. And that's what is coming forth now, is an actually more evolved version of what I started many years ago.
So from your experience of the past, what I'm hearing you say is that there was a disconnect, and now it's all about grounding, incorporating, becoming one with the source energy, knowing self, not relinquishing self, but knowing self and merging with the source energy that's all around us.
Yes.
There's a lot of, from all the decades, from all practices, it is all about letting go, becoming, emptying the mind, becoming connected with and letting the motions go. So in doing so, I've seen women in particular, there seems to be, opposed to the men, the women get disconnected from their feminine and they get disconnected from their heart, and then they have to start living in their mind from an intellectual point of view.
Yes.
And then the whole disconnection happens at that moment, and what happens is they have this stunned look on their face, like the deer in the headlights. Mm-hmm. And they're frozen in time. They're not able to be who they are, which is all about the nurturing love of a woman and the ease and the flow of that. Where men have that too, and they can bring the intelligence in, they can bring the wisdom in, of course, mm-hmm. but they need to come from a place of grounding and connecting. So your work is very, very powerful and very profound.
Yes, and my experience of, I love what you just said, it was brilliant. And my experience of this whole thing has been that within me is the man and the woman. And in trying to resolve my parents' bad relationship, sorry mom and dad, but I don't think you're going to watch this, but in trying to resolve my parents' bad relationship, I split myself into a similar relationship internally. And really, the story of my life has been resolving that inner relationship between the inner masculine, which is, in a sense, goes down the middle and is more like light and is more like a bolt of aware conscious lightning that runs through my spine. It's also the container that holds the whole thing. And then around this central core dances this fluid physical body and emotional self. And it's a little bit like you sometimes see those Shiva and Shakti representations where she's dancing around him. But that goes on within me. And so what I've done in my life is I've had too much being the masculine where I kind of go out and up. And then I've gone, oh no, that's not right. I better be the feminine. And I've gone all into this, more surrendered mode. But then I've lost contact with the will, the steady power of the I am consciousness. And what's happened with my iWave work is that those have become one, and the marriage has started to really happen within me. And so my students are getting there much more quickly than ever in 25 years of teaching various things. It's because I've had an internal integration. It's like everyone in consciousness is pretty close to that now. And so it's about inner marriage.
Well, let's look at that on a further note. We had the women's liberation.
Yes.
Many years ago.
How
many
did that
decades
work for
ago.
us? Yeah.
Yes. And at this moment in time, we have another evolution that's happening in Scandinavia, where the women are saying no. I am saying no to the Viking power, the energy that men control and dominate women.
Yes.
And now they are controlling the men now.
Yes.
They are saying, no, we are in charge, and we are the Viking now, and we are the Viking women. So it's gone to the extreme of being passive to the very aggressive.
Yes.
Which neither of them work.
Neither of them work. Yeah.
So there is a middle road, there is a way to be in the balance. And your work is polarizing, not the extreme. You respect the masculine, you respect the feminine,
yes.
but you harmonize with both of them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're incredibly intuitive. So yes, and I never use the word balance or middle path myself, because I always think of gray when I think of that. And really, there's a white and a black. And if you think of the yin-yang sign, they dance together, but it never becomes gray. So there is this intense masculine energy in all of us, and this intense feminine energy, and how they dance together is dynamic. And actually my logo is like this, the infinite wave, and it's always both and. And it's a spiral growth of evolution rather than looping around and saying, okay, the men are in control, we're patriarchal. No, the women are in control, we're matriarchal. But what does it even feel like for those to dance together? We don't really know, because we have models of domination, you know, and we have heard of this idea of partnership. And I'm not talking about outer relationships, because it will never work until it happens within. But what is partnership within your own energy field? And that has been a big awakening for me, to find out that there is such a thing, and it's wanting to express itself.
Well, let's explore that. What would that be like, to know that you can harmonize and dance the dance with your love and your beloved, your husband, your boyfriend, your friend, from
Yes.
that point of view?
Exactly. What would it be like? I have one branch of my work is called Romantic Enlightenment. And people come to that training because they want to fix their relationships. Very often it's women drag their husbands and they want to fix the husband. And what we find out as we explore is that it really is an inside job. That however many times I try to, for example, attract the right kind of person or be the right kind of person in relationship, it's always going to end up mirroring my own internal balance. So what we do is we explore how to energetically change that inner balance. And it's extraordinary how when somebody has that shift and their enlightenment actually becomes this inner dance of love, how the outer relationship just starts changing without having to work for years on using I statements and whatever else you do, you know, which are all perfectly good techniques. But ultimately, we're always going to come back to where we're really at inside ourselves, and it's going to mirror itself outwards.
So in essence, there's no changing your partner. It's all about going inward and working with yourself. And
Well,
if you want the change in the partner, it's about connecting to yourself, grounding yourself, and expressing yourself, and actually knowing yourself 100%. Not diminishing yourself, but allowing yourself to express yourself and celebrate yourself.
Yes, it's very celebratory. I mean, reality, for myself, my life has been kind of like waking up from a bad dream. And I don't have to create something good, because what's reality is already wonderful. So celebration seems to be what happens to me as everything else gets less real, as the illusion of suffering gets less real, whether it's in my relationship. There's 4 biggies, right? Love, wealth, health, and life purpose. That's what we're all really concerned about. One of those, relationships, love, wealth, all of our financial and supply issues and abundance issues, and then health, all of our body stuff, and then life purpose, our creativity, what did we come here to do? Those 4 biggies are all going to be a reflection of our internal state of consciousness. Everyone knows this, but I'm teaching this, and I do have some ways of teaching it that are not just mental. They're very practical and experiential.
So in saying experiential, there is a lot of being in that moment with your partner, being in that moment with yourself, and allowing this to speak to you and see from an organic sense, as it wells up in you, what actually is truth.
Yes. Yeah, that's beautifully put. Because truth is always wanting to, like you said, wells up in you. And that to me is a very fluid image. I loved the way you said that. And I was looking at you as you said it, and I kind of felt like, yeah, I felt something well up in me. So part of what I teach is that we are all very dry. We've become very dry, and we need to become wet. And now I always make the joke at the very beginning when someone hears that is, as soon as you hear that, you probably think about sex. And that's pretty funny. That means you're dry. Because for most of us, the only place that we access the fluid nature of the universe, the fact that everything in the universe is made of waves, is when we have sex, or when we think about sex or something. Because the rest of our lives, we're rigid, we're contracted, we're out of the flow, our very bodies are hard, our thoughts are hard, our emotions are frozen as though we're still 5 years old. All parts of ourselves at all levels of being have become dry. And so what I teach is called the meltdown, where you learn to go from being dry in body, emotions, and in thoughts, and even in spirit, to being wet at all those levels, to being fluid. So that what seems to be a particle, which is my personal self, Katie, becomes a wave. And we've all heard about that in science, that reality is both particles and waves. And it's not about only being a wave, but it's being able to very quickly dissolve from the experience of being this separate particle to being a wave.
Well, this seems to be a perfect example. Being wet conjures up ideas that there's movement going on. There's a constant flow of energy. And that is what the opposite of what practice manners is.
And I'm English, so.
Yes. Practice manners and also being, well, the English would be a stiff upper lip.
Yes. How do you do that?
Yes, and holding it in and basically allowing yourself to be diminished and in a very robotic way of being.
Yes.
This is the complete opposite
it's
of
the
it.
complete opposite of that, yes.
Yes, the wetness is the actual movement.
Yes.
And the flow, and it equals to life, what life is. Life is continually to creating itself.
Yes.
And when you tap into that, then it becomes very, very, very beautiful and juicy and
Juicy
alive.
as wet, yes.
And when it's alive, when there's aliveness to it,
Yes.
there's great possibilities.
Yes.
When you are dry and contained and locked in, and everything is the same from moment to moment as you are controlling yourself inside, and there's no experiential at that moment going on, then what happens is life is not there, quite simply.
Yes. And I want to just say for anyone watching this that when you hear us two wet, juicy women saying this, it might be a little scary because it might sound like you're going to become you might not be listening to this in Marin, California. And so you might feel as though this is going to be some California thing where you're going to be writhing on the floor all the time. And in fact, my experience has been that I can be extremely wet and fluid, even just sitting completely still and looking completely normal.
Absolutely.
Like this is dry and this is wet.
It's very subtle.
It's very subtle.
Yes, it's
learning it, I've found, for people isn't so subtle, but then it can be scaled back to complete ordinary life. You can live a fluid life and nobody knows it. You can look like just one of the particles in the room, and yet you're experiencing life as the flow that it is. And that means abundance. It means that at every moment what we need is available because we're connected oceanically to everything. So for example, let's say that this oceanic field is God. I don't mind the word God. I used to hate it, but I'm down and jiggy with it now. It just means what it means to most people, other than an old man in the sky. So,
well, perhaps we are saying that it's energy. And energy is as simple as that. It's the purity of energy that we are sourcing.
Yes.
And we are connecting to.
Yes, and my experience of God is that it is energy and information. And for example, if I can connect to that field juicy wetly, then God, for example, knows more single people than I do. God, this field, this oceanic infinite wave, as I call it in my work, knows exactly where the abundance is that could flow to you right now when you need it. Because everything already exists. It's just waiting to pour through us as channels of aliveness, and on all these very practical levels, like the rent and the husband and whatever it might be, the health energy, the live energy that heals the body, or the incredible inspiration to do our life purpose.
Well, there has been saying that when you actualize that, you're pulling it to you. But also you need to apply the action, and you need to be connected to the source energy and connected to yourself to allow that to happen, to remove the obstacles in your way that keep love from you. Because
Yeah.
love is there. And all we have to do, we don't have to seek the love. We don't have to go look for the love. It's there. So just remove the negativity. Remove the patterns that are blocking love from being there.
Yeah, that's what Course in Miracles says, isn't it? Yeah, I think
Yes.
that's what you're quoting. It's so beautiful that our task is not to seek for love, but to remove the obstacles to love, because
Absolutely.
it's already here, yes.
So moments ago, you gave me an example of what it was to be in that connection to yourself, of being wet.
Mm-hmm.
Moments ago, you showed me this, but what did that feel like at that moment? What is the clear distinction between being in it and not being in it?
I can think of three, actually, and just so our viewers know, we haven't rehearsed this, and I haven't got a shtick that I want to sell, but I can think of three aspects of how it feels to me when I'm wet rather than dry. And the first one is I feel more expanded. So actually, maybe I can even take you and viewers on a little quick journey. So it's like if you're dry, which we all are, we're like a sponge, a sea sponge that has become washed up on the beach. And it's not dead, but it's almost dead. So it's dry and it's solid. And when you put that sponge back in the warm ocean, in the moving, dynamic, living ocean, the first thing that happens is it expands. And sometimes in class, I bring one of those little dry sponges and I put it in water and it expands about 5 times. So one thing about feeling wet rather than dry is that we feel a sense that we have more space. We don't have to sit like this because somebody might not like the fact that we exist. So the first one is expansion. The second one is that instead of being static, we're dynamic. Instead of being frozen in space, not moving, we are moving. And you picked up on this right at the beginning when I even just said iWave. You said, it's moving. And that's really the core of being wet, is that you are moving. And it turns out, as you become more available to the movement of life, that movement is not something that we do. And this is not my quote, this is Emily Conrad Daoud. Movement is not something that we do, it's what we are. We are movement. We are not an ocean that has waves going through it. We are the waves. And so as we become more wet, our bodies literally move into a kind of pulsation with the pulsation of life. Just like if we were in the water, we would be kind of flowing with all the currents and the waves and the tide and the wind that makes the ocean have all these multiple waves. In our bodies, these waves from the universe are constantly passing through us. Some of them show up as rhythms and pulses like breath and the heart. So being wet means that you go from static to moving. And the third thing is that you become alive and connected. So that poor sponge on the beach, it wasn't really dead. It was in suspended animation, and it wasn't getting the messages from the ocean that would give it its live guidance. So when we come back into wet, we start to get what we need to know. And for example, when they had the tsunami, and Eckhart Tolle always uses this example, the wild animals didn't drown because they got the message from the all that is that they should go up onto higher ground. And the domesticated animals drowned, and a lot of people, because they were out of touch with the guidance that would have said, get out of there, the tsunami's coming. So when we become wet, we actually become alive and connected to the central control of the universe that always tells us where to be and what to do.
And also connected to others. If we are connected to ourselves in this harmonious way, then we have a relationship with ourselves and others in the most beautiful way.
Yes.
The way that it can be of a way of total celebration.
Yes.
And this to me is the dance of life, nothing more and nothing less.
Yes. I love that you keep saying celebration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because this is what it is. It's nothing more than that. We're not here just to work. We're not here just to be lost in a label of who we think we are. There's so much more and so many more possibilities
Yes.
to explore.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's exciting, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Where do you see your work going? As you've been seeing it from the past and
I
in
can't
the
see
present
where
tense.
it's going, to be really honest. I can't see where it's going. I've been in a bit of a hiatus in the last year because of illness in my family in England. So I'm mostly working with private clients right now. Many people ask me every week, people email and call me wanting to know when I'm going to be teaching seminars again, and I guess if they go to my website and sign up, they'll find out when that's going to happen.
So if one comes to you, what would the experience be like on that experiential? Would there be body work? Would there be movement? Would there be a exploratory of mind and spirit and connection of that? And how do you facilitate that?
Yes. Well, I have work that is for private consultation, which I've been actually teaching and certifying people in for many, many years, and it's called iWave work. And it does, as you said, it covers the body, it covers the mind, it covers the emotions, it involves breath. Sometimes a person might come in and we're regressing them to a past life. Other times we'll be opening up their sacrum. It's actually very multidimensional work, but the bottom line of the work is when somebody comes in for a session, I ask them, what do you want to get out of this session? And whatever they say, by the time they leave, they have it. So I don't know how we get there. We use all these different tools of the iWave work, which is bringing wave motion into all these dry, stuck places. The thing I've noticed is that it works, and it's not because I'm so brilliant, it's because the infinite wave that we're all part of is so brilliant. And it actually has the solutions to everything, even our most seemingly impossible problems.
There's been a lot of emphasis on childhood,
Yes.
the dysfunction of childhood,
Yes.
the unnaturalness of events that happened. When I say unnaturalness, I mean that at that moment in time, it wasn't as nurturing or as loving as potentially it could have been.
Yes.
So a lot has happened at that moment when the child is at such a young, impressionable age and looking towards the parents to give that of what is their right to be given
Yes.
in the way of love. And in saying that, what's happening today is a lot of work going on to work with that energy and to focus on it and to merge with that, to allow it to be there but not be wounded.
Yes, exactly.
So what part of this would come into play?
Yes, well, the thing that happens, as you say, to all of us is that even from birth, and a lot of my work is actually to clear the birth trauma out of the body, because from birth, whatever happens gets frozen as reality for that young organism. And even, they have this thing called the gosling effect, where when a little baby gosling is born, if the first thing it sees is a vacuum cleaner, it goes after that and says, "Are you my mother?" And it quack, 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 well, I guess goslings are geese and they don't quack, but basically whatever we first come across in the very early days of our life and years, that becomes mom, dad, God, reality, and it also mirrors back to us what we are: worthy, unworthy, too much, not good enough. And this all becomes a dry self, which I call the small I. My work is called Small I Wave, but it's about getting back to realizing that we're the big I. But we get stuck in this small, dry self, and that becomes really kind of a cult. We become absolutely addicted to being that self. We don't know that there's actually a real self that's much more expansive, dynamic, and connected than that. And so one of the ways is to work with the inner child's trauma. And that really is quite effective as long as you don't get into an endless loop of drama.
I would like to be experiential at this moment with you. I'd like to go to your childhood.
Yes.
And
Let's go.
yes, you mentioned about your parents.
Yes.
And no reflection on your parents because their journey was their journey.
Yes.
And there's no judgment.
And they're very good people. Yeah.
Absolutely, no judgment. What was your experience like? Because I'm sensing mostly of the people that have created the most profound, incredible techniques and offered us the way to be in this world now,
Yes.
are the people who are the most wounded,
Yes.
or the most confused.
Yes.
They had to find their way out of that state of being.
Yes.
And they come to this incredible understanding, and now they can share all this wisdom with others.
Yes, exactly. As you said, we are, those of us who do this kind of work, are teaching what we need to learn. We're very often the most wounded. And I would say that the problem in my childhood was that it wasn't just the family dysfunction, but that the family felt responsible for the entire planetary dysfunction, because my parents had worked on this atomic bomb, and it had exploded in Hiroshima. And so within our family mythology was the idea that we're responsible for the pain of the world. So not only did I, as a child, feel my own pain, but I felt responsible for the pain of the world. So I've been trying to find a solution, not just for myself, but for everybody on the planet. And I haven't, but that drive in my, you could say my wounded self, has also become part of my destiny. And I've noticed with almost everyone I work with that within their wounds is the kernel of their incredible, powerful destiny. And that is good news.
Absolutely. So in your wounding, how did you play with this wounding? What happened?
I became completely dry. I mean, really, for me, it's a very real image, because my body became completely frozen. And then, of course, being so frozen, I was attracted to a form of spirituality that made me more frozen, because it was sitting for hours a day trying to find stillness when there is no stillness in the universe. Now, I know that when a lot of spiritual teachers use the word stillness, what they mean is that when your consciousness is in tune with the waves of life, then the mind is quiet and feels peaceful. But there is no stillness in the universe. And trying to simulate stillness by sitting still, by trying to still the natural creativity of consciousness, just results in incredible explosions of either illness or addiction or depression. It's amazing how deleterious some spiritual practices can be. I don't know where I got off on that, but it came as a direct result of my childhood wounding, was that I was attracted to even more of the same through my spiritual path that I was first attracted to.
Well, I think what you're mentioning there is that because of your wounding, you went out and started to seek possibilities and answers to that.
Yes.
And you were exploring different ideologies and different ways of being in the spiritual communities,
Yes.
but that did not work for you. And this is akin to what the Buddha did and Jesus
Yes.
Christ did,
Yes.
and so many other masters and avatars, where they
That puts me in good company.
Absolutely.
Puts both of us in good company.
Absolutely.
And we're women.
yeah, so what happened is, in that looking outside of themselves, they found themselves, and they found that energy of their own and claimed that
Yes.
Jesus Christ from
Yes.
the way of unconditional love. He was completely lost within the rapture of unconditional love all the time. Buddha from the way of compassion and wisdom.
Yeah, they're very similar, those two.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was happening is that they had to, there was a journey. They were born like that. We have that in an innate way, but in order to express it, we have to go out and find it and go through those moments of time of seeking it outside of ourselves and looking.
And
because
even
that is the journey.
Yes, even Buddha had a good childhood, and probably Jesus did too, other than being born in a manger. But Buddha had this very happy childhood. And actually in Atlantic magazine this month, they're talking about how the cult of self-esteem, overly attending to children, doesn't give us the ability to learn to navigate life's lessons. We become overly protected by what seems to be good parenting, which is in reaction to the bad parenting that the parents got. So it is a spiral of learning and growth. It's funny, isn't it, that Buddha, even with that incredible magical childhood that his father tried to give him, ended up having to go and see suffering and experience the lessons of suffering. Some of us, you know, didn't have any problem with the lessons of suffering. That wasn't our edge.
What would you like to share with others that is really, really dear to your heart, that really, from your journey, from your experience, and also a combination of what you've seen with the people that you've worked with throughout the years, the most important factor that you have seen that has consistently been showing up?
What a beautiful question. Thank you. I, at this moment, would like to share that you're safe. You and I am you, and that we're safe, and that we all hear that fear is the new bad, you know, and it used to be evil, but now we call it fear, and there is this incredible background radiation that we live in this culture and this world right now of anxiety. Whether we project it onto the economy or our aging or our children's addictions or whatever it might be, we live, many of us, with an underlying feeling of fear. And in fact, that is based on something that's not true. We are completely safe, we're completely held, we're completely supplied, whether it's financially, energetically, in terms of love and relationship, in terms of life energy and healing, and in terms of expressing our full life purpose. It's all available. We haven't missed the boat. We're not the one hard stone that God made that he, she can't dissolve. In fact, we never left our home. We're still there. Being in a body doesn't take us away from our home. We don't have to wait to die or even have a near-death experience to be safe. We're safe. It's all okay.
So in that safety, for those who would want to know, to validate that, to have proof of that, I would say to see how it feels. What does it feel like to be the opposite of this? What does it feel like? In the mind, in the body, in the emotions? And if it's not feeling right, what other possibility is there?
Yes.
To be curious, to see what the possibilities are.
Yes.
And in that curiosity, as you feel your way through, coming into this spiral way of being, the spiral way of balancing, of experiential, what happens is you feel that you are effortless. It's just everything is happening. There's no push and pull, and that will tell you a lot.
Yes, that tells me a lot. I'm just being transmitted to by you. Thank you. And one thing that, even if you never come to see me, I don't care, or if you never do my work, but even if you just remember the sponge, remember that, oh, I'm a dry sponge, I can get back in the water. I found that that one little image of going from dry to wet, I can teach a much more effective way if you're curious, but even if you just use that, it might really help you to feel safer in your life and more connected with everything.
An example of the sponge would be that there is a contraction going on when the sponge is dry.
Yes.
And as the sponge gets wet and gets larger and full of life,
yes,
then there's an expansion.
Yes.
And we would coordinate that to the emotions. Are your emotions rigid and tight, coming from judgment, or are they open and looking at it from an experiential, what possibilities are here, and not judging it and not saying that this is good or this is bad. This is just an experience.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What final thoughts do you have?
Well, my
like
final thought is in response to what you just said, that with emotions, what I found is that I need to change the belief that is keeping them stuck. But I also need to allow the energy of the emotion to move through the body, because right now it's stuck as like a little dry lump inside me. And with opening up my breathing and my sense of my body as being a sea creature, the energy can move. If I move the energy of the emotion in the body and I change the thought, which there's a whole huge conversation about that, but don't have time for right now, but by separating those two and not trying to do them in the same moment, then an emotion becomes pure joy.
which equals life.
Yes.
Katie, it's been an absolute divine pleasure speaking with you.
Yes, and you too.
And this is where life sits, and I look forward to having many conversations with you in the future.
Yes, it's very wonderful to have met you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. The Art of Conscious Living, thank you. Do take care of yourself.